This happened nearly 5 years ago, back when I was staying in a small one-bedroom apartment. Around that time, my parents purchased a house about an hour outside the city. It was a large countryside property with plenty of open land. Because of their work schedules and the complexity of relocating long distance, they had to arrange for their belongings to be moved in about a week before they could arrive. To help out, I agreed to stay at the house during that transition period and oversee everything. I arrived on a Saturday morning, met the movers, and let them unload everything inside. They finished by evening, leaving stacks of boxes in the corners of each room. The only thing properly set up was the couch, which I planned to use for the time being. Seeing the house filled with furniture made me realize just how massive the place really was. The rooms were incredibly spacious, and the long, empty hallways felt strange without anything set up yet. After having some leftovers I'd brought with me, I decided to check out the backyard. It featured a wide patio with a built-in fire pit and had various pieces of outdoor furniture scattered around. I grabbed a small lawn chair, placed it near the fire pit, and settled in. The night was breezy, especially being surrounded by open fields, but it was calm and quiet. I must have been outside for about an hour when something unusual happened. A man appeared in the distance. He was walking far out in the field. I glanced in the direction he had come from and saw nothing but empty land. Looking ahead, there was nothing but the same open space. I watched him continue on until the fog gradually concealed him. The entire time, I couldn't figure out where he had come from or where he was going. Several minutes passed as I sat there, thinking about the whole thing. Then, unexpectedly, he reappeared, this time heading back in the same direction he had come from. He was slightly closer now, enough that it felt unsettling. Not wanting to draw attention to myself, I decided to go inside. I stayed in for about an hour, mostly scrolling through my phone. But I also checked the windows a few times. There was nothing unusual outside anymore. Around 12:30, I grabbed a blanket from one of the boxes, tossed it over the couch, and settled in for the night in the middle of the living room. When I woke up, something felt wrong. I wasn't sure what it was, but I felt uneasy. My eyes adjusted to the dimly lit room, with shadows cast from the stacked up boxes making it hard to see. Then, a sudden beam of light moved across the space. I squinted as it swept across the room before shifting away. A moment later, I saw another small glare moving outside the front window. Then, just as suddenly, it angled directly into the room, illuminating everything, including me. By the time I could properly see again, the light had disappeared, and nothing was visible through the window. I quickly grabbed my phone and moved closer, trying to see who had been out there, but whoever it was had already disappeared into the fog. I never found out who was outside or what they wanted, but my best guess is that someone saw the movers earlier and assumed the house was empty, maybe even planning to break in. Whatever the case, I think I was fortunate. If I hadn't woken up when I did, I might have found out the hard way what their true intentions were. When I was 15, I lived with my mom, dad, 2 brothers, and my sister in a quiet town in North Carolina. I do miss living there, but there was one thing I never liked: the constant downpours. One Saturday night, the storm was particularly intense. The thunder rumbled so loudly that it shook the walls. My 2 brothers and I were stuck with nothing to do since my sister was at a friend's house. It was only 8 p.m., so we decided to pass the time by playing video games. We were playing this bizarre PS2 game where all the WWE wrestlers were driving cars and shooting at each other. I can't recall the name, but I remember the exact moment the power went out. I was about to defeat my brother in the game when suddenly everything went dark. At the same time, there was a strange pop from outside. We thought it was just a blown fuse. I called for my dad, who was already getting his rain jacket on, to check the fuse boxes. Our house had 2 fuse boxes. One on the outside of the house attached to a telephone pole, and another inside. My dad asked me to come outside and hold the flashlight while he checked the outdoor box. I stood there, holding the beam on the fuse box as he flicked through the switches. Nothing worked. He told me to stay put and keep trying the switches while he went inside to check the indoor fuse box. The rain was coming down hard, and I just wanted to go inside. As I stood there, holding the flashlight, I thought I heard something in the woods behind our house, like a large tree branch breaking. I turned the light toward the woods, and for a split second, I thought I saw a hand peek around the edge of a tree. As soon as the beam hit it, the hand vanished back behind the trunk. My heart raced, but I quickly shut the fuse box and rushed back to the house. When I found my dad, he was tinkering with the indoor fuse box in the hallway. I told him what I had seen, but he seemed dismissive, only half listening. He followed me outside to where I had seen the hand. I handed him the flashlight as he cautiously stepped into the woods. I stayed by the back door, waiting in the silence. After a while, he had moved so far into the woods that I couldn't see the beam anymore. Growing uneasy, I walked toward the woods, calling out for him. Suddenly, I heard footsteps nearby. I called his name, and to my surprise, he answered, but his voice came from a different direction. Panic set in as I realized I was hearing 2 sets of footsteps, one closer and one farther away. I ran toward his voice, and eventually I found him walking back toward the house, breathing heavily. I was able to tell him about the footsteps I had heard, but he just told me to go inside and lock the door. He'd continue searching. I went back in and joined my brothers and mom by the back door, waiting for him to return. We didn't expect what happened next. We heard someone trying to open the front door, which was locked. I went over to check, thinking it was my dad, but my mom stopped me. She looked through the peephole and then screamed. She pushed us all away from the door and told us to go upstairs. At that exact moment, my dad came in through the back door. I didn't see what happened next, but I heard him yelling at someone outside. When he came back inside, he said he had seen someone running into the woods. It seemed like the situation was over. But the next morning, we found the basement window had been shattered, and muddy footprints were scattered all over the carpet. The worst part was that some cash and a few valuable antiques had been stolen. But it wasn't just that. The muddy footprints continued up the stairs, but then they stopped. Our basement door had a heavy-duty lock, and I think it was that lock that kept the intruder from going further into the house. Who knows what could have happened if they'd made it upstairs. It's been a challenging few nights around here. It started with flood warnings. Then those were quickly replaced by thunderstorm watches. Before long, the warnings shifted again. This time to tornado alerts. The sirens blaring in the distance add a strange, surreal touch to this new nightly routine. What used to be something I looked forward to, those heavy thunderstorms, has taken on a new feeling. I remember how I used to enjoy a good storm. I'd settle in on the couch, pull an extra pillow and blanket around me, get comfortable, and just let nature put on its show. I'd watch as lightning lit up the sky, tearing through the clouds with a sudden brilliance, illuminating the houses, treetops, and the landscape around. The thunder would follow moments later, a deep rumble that shook the windows, sending a subtle but undeniable buzz through your body. It was always a reminder of how powerful nature can be, and for some reason that felt comforting in its own way. But tonight was different. The forecast had promised a late-night thunderstorm, so when I started to notice flashes of light around midnight, I figured it was just the storm rolling in earlier than expected. But I wasn't quite prepared for the strangeness that followed. I tried to finish watching an episode of Orange is the New Black, but the flashing kept distracting me. And before long, I decided I had to check it out. I pulled off my headphones, stood up, and made my way to the living room window. The flashes were unlike anything I'd seen in a while. No rumble of thunder to follow. No distant sound that usually accompanies lightning. The flashes were sharp and clear, but there was no follow-up noise, no warning. Normally, when lightning strikes close by, you'd expect the boom of thunder to hit not long after, but there was nothing. Just the brilliant, disorienting flashes. I was curious now, so I made my way to the kitchen window. It's large, with a wide view of the yard and the road outside. The moon was nowhere to be seen, and the entire world outside had that pitch-black feel, as though the darkness was swallowing up the world beyond the glass. It felt odd, unsettling, and for a moment the safety of the walls around me seemed less certain. Without the light, I had to move carefully, relying on memory to navigate through the house. I stepped into the kitchen, peered through the window, and waited for my eyes to adjust to the gloom. Everything outside was still, dark, and completely silent, save for those occasional flashes of light that continued to streak across the sky. I felt the familiar sense of unease slowly creep in, even though I knew I was safe inside. I told myself there was nothing to worry about, but it was hard to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As I stood there, staring into the dark night, I glanced up and saw the stars. The sky was clear, no storm clouds, no thunder, no rain, nothing. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful again. But then, just as I was about to turn away from the window, the next flash hit, brighter than the rest. And that's when I saw it. Through the glass, I saw the outline of someone standing no more than 5 feet away, just outside the window. It wasn't the storm, or the lightning, or the sirens that made me freeze. It was the realization that, in the pitch blackness of the night, someone was standing there, so close, separated by nothing more than the thin glass of the window pane. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but all I could do was stand still, staring at the figure. I didn't even move. I couldn't. For the longest time, it felt like I was trapped between two realities: the safety of my home and the very real, very terrifying presence just outside. My heart raced and my mind went in 100 directions at once, trying to find a logical explanation for what I was seeing. But there was no way to make sense of it. There was someone there, outside, so close I could almost reach out and touch them through the glass. And in that moment, the night stopped being a storm. It was just another typical Friday night. After finishing a long shift at work, I grabbed a quick microwave meal, sat down at my desk, and logged into a game with some friends. I had an energy drink, a few snacks, and was ready to stay up late, unwinding after the day. We played for a while, and I lost track of time. At some point, a knock at the door broke my focus. I told my friends to hang on, took off my headset, and stood up. As I turned, I noticed how dark the room had gotten. Outside, only the glow from my monitor lit up the space. It struck me as strange. No one should be knocking this late. Then, I noticed someone standing outside the window, staring in at me. A chill spread through my chest as I locked eyes with the figure. The man called out, asking me something, but I was too caught off guard to process his words. "What?" I asked, stepping closer to the window. He repeated himself, asking if I was someone named Jake or Jack, some name I didn't recognize. I shook my head no. Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing past the front yard. Feeling uneasy, I quickly shut the blinds and sat back down, telling my friends what had just happened. At first, they didn't believe me, but as they heard the uncertainty in my voice, their tone shifted. They told me to check the doors and windows. I followed their advice, realizing I'd never actually locked the windows before. Once everything was secure, they assured me it was probably nothing, and we went back to playing. A couple of hours passed, and honestly, I had forgotten about it. I figured if something bad were going to happen, it would have been right away. But then, another knock came, this time louder, and from the front door. It made me tense up in my chair. I whispered to my friends about it. They told me to check who it was and call the cops if needed. Moving quietly, I made my way to the door and peered outside. It was him again, just standing there, waiting. Something felt even more off this time. He kept glancing to his right, as if looking at something or someone. My stomach turned as I slowly stepped back and reached for my phone. I whispered to the operator, explaining the situation. Another knock came as I returned to the door to check again. The man was still there, but then I noticed something else, a faint noise from the side of the house. I focused on the sound, following it with my eyes until I saw a shadow move near one of the windows. The glass shifted slightly, then dropped back down. Someone was trying to open it. They tried again, but the lock held. A long, tense minute passed. I stood frozen, listening as the dispatcher updated me on the officer's arrival. Then, a dull scraping sound came from outside near the window frame. I could see the wood shifting slightly. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do, when suddenly, quick footsteps moved from the front door to the side. Then, just as fast, both sets of footsteps ran off into the darkness. A moment later, flashing red and blue lights reflected off the walls. The officers arrived and searched the area, but there wasn't much they could do. I gave them a detailed description of one of the men, but it wasn't enough to track them down. It's been over a year since that night, and they've never come back.